Yeah. How are you? What's going on for you? It's 5:30, 5?
Yeah, it's about 5 o'clock. Yeah, I'm about to graduate, so
Wow.
uh, yeah, it's been finals week, and I'm just over it.
Yeah. What are you graduating from?
I'm getting my bachelor's in religious studies,
Awesome.
and then I'm hoping to looking into grad school for sociology, actually.
Oh.
Um, yeah. Uh,
Now I've been meaning to try and listen and read more about your thinking on lack and negative
okay.
pragmatism. And I haven't got around to it. But from the parts that I've heard,
hmm
what makes most sense for you in terms of like where are you at with your thinking?
Well, um, yeah, I mean, this idea of negative pragmatism, I still don't really know what it is.
Mm, mm,
But I feel like I have my finger on something.
mm.
But you could say the concept is beyond my intellectual abilities currently. So I'm
Cool.
talking to everybody to see what could that look like.
Mm, mm.
And of course, we're encountering a lot of theoretical positions
Yeah,
um, to even want to approach this topic. I talked to Chetan because I thought the Lacanian perspective was always interesting.
right. And that's his area. Is that because I don't know?
Uh, yeah, I mean he definitely has more grip on that area, at least from what I know.
Okay.
In comparison to some other people, I would say. I mean, I think other people that I've talked to, like I have a friend, he's very into Aristotle.
Okay.
I have some people very into Heidegger.
Yes.
Um, I'm actually very into there's one guy I could probably talk about a lot is actually Martin Buber.
Okay. Yeah, Booba. Cool. I've
Yeah.
I've actually just started reading. Is it Thou and I and Thou or what
Yeah,
is
I
it?
am now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Wow, though that lines up well. Okay, cool.
One of my
Um,
favorite texts, actually.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm enjoying it. Uh, yeah. So you're pretty philosophically minded though, aren't you? Like this.
I am, but I also got like very like intermixed with like my journey started because I got curious about religion,
Right.
and then I got sucked into philosophy somehow, and then I got sucked into like the psychological as well. Like I started reading Carl Jung, I've
Yeah.
read some Freud, I've
Okay.
read a little bit here of Lacan. I think uh, usually for me it's just like, well, this seems like a lot in terms of either I dedicate myself to Lacan or I dedicate,
Yeah, no,
there's a
I know
bunch
the
of
struggle. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of limitations going on, and there's always this haunting point where you go, well, did I really spend enough time reading Lacan or Freud, or
Mm,
do I need to go back to the basics of philosophy? Recently, I've been getting back interested into reading Plato again.
okay.
Um, yeah, and
Okay.
I actually find it very enjoyable.
Yeah, well, it's great that I think it's just great that you're reading the texts. I mean, yeah, when things get so busy for me, I end up relying on almost secondhand, like hearing other people talk about,
hmm
source material and take that sort of their interpretation as a given. That's not a very rigorous way of attending to these ideas. But yeah, I mean, I think the religious, the philosophical, the psychological, they all go together, really, don't they?
hmm
Um,
hmm
so I guess I come more from the psychological perspective as the starting point.
hmm
So um,
hmm
in terms of what I might be able to offer to the
hmm
negative pragmatism idea that you're trying to think through. Um, my mind goes to thinking about the comment that I left on the recent YouTube video.
Oh, yes. My takeaway from that conversation was we tend to be okay. So what I understood from Shaitan is there's the idea of non-relation from Lacan,
Mhm.
that the non-relation basically refers to the idea that there is no ideal relationship.
Yeah, you can't have it.
And yeah, you can't have it, right? You can't. So, and this is grounded in the sexual relationship. But it's also the side of creativity.
Mm,
But yeah, I'm going to recap, and then, but then Chetan says something about there's a kind of repetition that wants to go to its end.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and and that's the part that I found interesting, because I guess, and I was going to ask you about this, is we had another conversation about agency and you could say free will. I think
mm,
you're making a distinction between the two, and then I'm also very curious because I think that the question that I was left with
mm,
Jaitan is um, this question of discipline.
mm,
I feel like that's actually a very complex thing because discipline, you could say, presupposes a kind of a certain amount of pure willpower,
mm,
right? It's just a matter of doing it and just committing oneself. So I guess from the psychological perspective, um, what is your understanding of willpower? Do you know is or do you believe there's already something sort of driving us anyways? Like I actually think the concept of willpower is the recognition that there's already something driving us.
mm,
But I think it gets tripped up with these ideals that
mm,
we meaning that we think that our drive should correspond to the ideal.
mm,
But I would like to propose, well, what if it doesn't? Does that mean that one has the lack of willpower? Does that mean that one has the lack of discipline? Yeah, we'll leave that out there. What comes to mind?
yeah, yeah, yeah. When you say that our drives should we believe that our drives should correspond to the ideal, can you just expand that slightly for me? What you mean?
Yeah, so it would be like somebody thinking that let's say like I noticed that I wake up midday and I should be a morning person, right? So the ideal is that I should be a morning person, and then I realize that no matter how hard I try, I still can't do it.
Mm,
Let's just say that, or I'm not doing it consistently. I'm failing here and there. Um,
mm,
so I guess my interpretation of that is there's this sort of understanding that there is something driving them.
mm,
But I guess the question is they're interpreting that drive
mm,
to give a kind of content to it.
mhm.
And I guess I'm saying that that may not be true.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah. So
yeah.
just yeah.
No, there's a lot there. Yes. I mean, the first place my mind goes when you give that example, it's just says who. Whenever someone uses the
Hmm.
word should, like
Hmm.
says who based on what? Where does that come from? First of all, right? Like that's important to interrogate. Um, Trying to think about how to come at this. So from my perspective, there is so much that's unconscious, and necessarily so there will always be so much that is unconscious. So the idea, when you talk about willpower, um, I think we first have to try and get clear on the fact that there may be things happening, just like you said, under the surface, driving our behavior, our motivations, that we're not just consciously or even easily aware of. Sometimes, if someone just stops for long enough and really does consider it in more depth, they can find out more. Like it's like a spectrum, really.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily the case that it's locked there in the unconscious. So there is definitely a level of agency that we have over how aware can we get of what's going on inside ourselves as the starting point, but a
Hmm.
recognition that we're never going to be completely aware.
Hmm.
That I mean, I actually, from my perspective, I don't think it's possible you can ever see it all.
Hmm.
Um, and so you take as a starting point um, a knowledge that there is only so much that I'm ever going to be aware of that I can use sort of in my calculations about how I'm going to address this gap between what I want for myself versus what I'm currently doing. And there's still a lot that you can do there in that ground, but it is important to acknowledge that there are things under the surface that drive us as well. So, hmm. So lack fits, I guess lack fits in. How does lack fit in here? So my understanding at least is that this drive when we're talking about lack is a drive to be in longing, to be in yearning. It's actually a desire or a drive to be in that state. It's not to have that in order to then be able to reach to then be able to have the thing that's being desired, to have the desired object, because the desired object, the ideal, you can't get it. So what I mean by that is that it's often the case that what is driving that yearning is a wish, a longing to be at one, right? To be with another completely at one. Right. But there's always going to be a gap there. You're never going to have that. So there is always going to be a sense inside that you're yearning for something, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so
Yep.
Noticing the yearning almost as a signal of vitality and your humanness is how I approach it. That might still be telling you something important about your hopes and your dreams and your preferences. And however, not to take it so seriously that it's actually pointing at something that you are able to achieve. Does that help?
Yes, I mean, I think Daniel talked about this today. He talked about we need a certain degree of self-forgetfulness.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's accurate. Because I think I shared the story with Chetan about I was very frustrated with myself for being you could say a short form writer. I'm always like a very essay.
Okay. Okay.
I'm an essay writer basically. I'm not a long form writer. I can't I couldn't do it. I think I tried to do it. I tried to write longer, and every time I um tried to uh write more, it was more like I really have nothing else to say. I really don't. I really can't even add to this.
Right.
And you could say after repeatedly still writing anyways, and I think I actually at a certain point I did kind of forget about my grievances with
Yeah.
the writing.
Yeah.
Eventually I discovered that I enjoyed writing short form. Like I enjoy it now. And now it feels miserable for some people to ask me, well, can you write a little bit of a longer piece? You
Why?
know?
What happens?
Yeah, I know, right? What happened?
Why does it feel miserable? What happens inside you when someone asks you that?
Well, I mean, I think it's because I think now it's like you encounter this thing of just like I feel like I'm just adding I'm repeating myself, I think.
Oh,
I'm
right.
just
If you say yes to
I'm
it, I see.
yeah,
Ah,
I'm just adding more fluff that doesn't need to be there. I think when I'm being asked to write more is it's more like, well, I think I've said already enough. I mean, I could try, but I think at that point I'm just like I'll probably find
mm,
myself repeating it. But I wonder, and this is the other part that I wonder of the conversation. I wonder if I let myself write short form enough that suddenly it will transform into long form.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I do wonder this because actually Chetan gave the example of the fact that he was like me and only read half read books for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it transformed through this repetition to now he cannot help but finish the book.
Hmm.
And he says that he wished that he could go
Go
back
back.
to his younger self, right? Like he's like now it's much more torturous that he feels that he has to. And
Mm,
I guess the idea of feeling that one has to is a
mm.
good
I,
is a
I
good
was
indicator.
Yeah, I was going to say there's sort of a compulsion when
Yeah.
you're describing that example that when someone asks you, I don't think it's just that they're asking you to write long form. It seems to me like there's a sense you're compelled to do it. Either that's the assignment, right, and you just have to, you don't have a choice, or for some other reason, maybe it's because you don't want to say no to them, or right. But it is, it's okay. It's when it feels when you feel that you don't have a choice, like a sense that you don't have a choice, that it just must be done.
Mm-hmm.
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 And so the noticing that you might have a choice could be a disruption to that, could be an interruption.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember watching a lot of videos about like, well, giving myself the discipline to finish a book or something,
Yeah.
and there's all these dedication kind of things like, set your plan, set your how many days a week that you want to read. I failed those every time. Those every time. But I would be very surprised when I did finish a book.
Yeah.
That was actually very interesting to me.
So you finished a book and you felt surprised.
Yeah, I felt surprised that I could, that I actually, it took very little effort,
Hmm.
actually.
And how did that
Um,
come about? That was just randomly you managed to, or you followed one of these set plans, or
no, I didn't follow any set plan. I found myself so absorbed,
yeah.
by the book, that I couldn't drop it. I mean, it was just like what I would think about the next day and the next day. And I'd be like, I have to finish this book. And actually, Martin Buber was one of those books. Uh,
Mm.
that when I cracked it up, I think I read it, I swallowed it, didn't even know what I read by the end of it. Then I read it again, and I read it a couple more times after
Mm. Well,
that.
maybe it's an indication, like when you don't, maybe it's an indication of something deeper that you can just finish a book without even having to enter into any kind of conscious argument in your head about whether or not you're going to finish it. It just happens. But
Mhm,
what you're talking about in terms of, and I'm sure this is something that everyone can relate to.
mhm,
Noticing I want more willpower, more discipline, I want to be able to study longer or whatever it is. And then sort of all these people with these plans and these ideas, and here's practically how you do it. For me, that always just misses out the key component, which is what goes on inside the person that
mhm,
interrupts them, that stops them, that prevents them, that is keeping them from doing this thing they're expressing they want to be able to do.
mhm,
And I have a particular focus on emotions because I think that we're just as a society, we're just terrible at dealing with emotions and understanding what they are and paying them enough attention. I think they get sort of belittled as these silly primal instincts to be carved off to one side, and let's get very practical with all our strategies and routines and lay that over the top. And yet that never works, right? So
mhm,
emotions somehow still have a way of controlling our behavior. So my thought on that sort of scenario is to always start to interrogate what you're feeling, what goes on inside you as you're, I mean, if we talk about reading a book and only getting halfway through, what goes on inside you emotionally. Um,
mhm,
when you get to that point and you stop engaging with it anymore and then you realize I want to keep reading it, like you have to really break down each scenario, and this is it's quite unsatisfying when you realize that it would be so nice to just have this sort of blanket way that we could abstractly talk about this as
mhm,
but it really comes down to the individual and then the individual scenario that you're talking about. um,
mhm,
but
mhm,
I would imagine, I don't know, I would imagine that there's some sort of emotional conflict that goes on about getting to a particular place in a book, noticing some part of you noticing that you might now, um, I don't know, like this is the choice point between whether I continue to finish it or not, some sort of anxiety you feel, then getting into something in your head around, like an argument in your head around, am I going to re-engage? I'm not going to re-engage. I should re-engage with it. I need to learn to finish books. How come I can't? Like this sort of argument. There's all sorts of ways it can play out.
mhm.
How does it go? How much do you want to talk about that example? I guess is the question. Like, how does that play
Um,
out?
I yeah, I would love to talk about that example.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating. I mean, because I can give an example when I was in the army actually, and
Okay.
this is a perfect
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
Um, I was having, you could say I didn't want to face what I needed to face because I was having to go through a transition period from army to civilian life.
Right.
Um, and it was funny because as the days got shorter and shorter, and I needed to take care of the things I needed to take care of, but the things that I didn't want to take care of or even want to think about, suddenly I picked up chess.
Mm,
It was so random,
wow.
and I was so immersed
Mhm.
in chess. I did that for about 2.5 months,
Wow.
and I was so immersed in it.
And this kept you from attending to what? Like what kinds of things are you
The,
talking about?
I mean, I think it was I kept attending to, I think the groundlessness that I was going to face going into civilian world.
The unknown.
Yeah, the unknown. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it didn't help that the army was just like, they were giving me all these transition classes, but they were just like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, you're not going to make what you used to make, and if you want us to show that how that actually looks, just keep in mind that it's not just your income, but the fact that everything we provide you, the housing, the healthcare, the insurances, and you start realizing like, yeah, that's true. That is actually a lot more money than the actual income I get
So
paid
that's the
as a soldier.
transition class is pointing out all the things you're no longer going
Yeah,
to have
yeah,
access to.
yeah.
And be so grateful to us that we gave those to you for a period of time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, yeah,
Wow. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. And it didn't make me feel any better when I said that I wanted to move to Arizona with my friends. And they're like, yeah, well, that's high risk. So they put me as a high risk. They
What does that
labeled me
mean?
as high risk. I was high risk because I didn't have any support. My family wasn't there.
Ah, I see.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what does assigning you as high risk provide you? Like what
It was supposed to just provide me with more classes, like how
like
do I
that?
build my resume, and
I see. More
are
support.
you, make sure you find a job before you leave. And I wasn't wanting to do any of those things, and so I played chess.
Was there any psychological support provided in that? Like, is there,
There was none, because I think I kept denying. It wasn't until
I see.
finally I had a lot of dreams, actually. A
Mm,
lot of dreams. And this
mm,
is when I learned that my dreams were a very good indicator of a coming meltdown, because I did end up becoming
mm.
what is it? Had insomnia.
Ah, right.
I couldn't sleep, and then the anxiety started, and then my anxiety could not let me sleep, and so I was having a vicious cycle of insomnia, anxiety, insomnia. To I had to turn myself in, to
Wow.
get some hardcore drugs and then psychological help a little bit. Um,
But you have to, it sounds like you have to present for it. So this wasn't part of transition class or transition
yeah, I had to
time. They
present
weren't
for it. Yeah.
providing you with, okay, I see.
Hmm.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, it had to get quite bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the anxiety, I can understand it. The anxiety ramps up.
Hmm.
You're
Hmm.
essentially being sent out into this huge unknown and being
Hmm.
reminded of all the things that are going to be different and that you won't have,
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
told that you're high risk. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, even, other basically, a lot of the environment is kind of like, it's risky to
Mm,
leave, go out on your own. You might as well just stay and do your 20 years. That's the safest option.
I
But
see.
I knew that was, I was just like, I don't believe that. I was like, you have to get out of the army someday.
Mm,
Um, so if people want to, have their safety, that's fine. I'm not opposed. But for me, I was just like, it's more than that.
mm,
I clearly want more than what
mm.
the army is
And
providing.
yeah, and the chess bit that happened in the gap between your starting transition classes and then sort of having the dreams and the insomnia and the anxiety. The chess happened
Hmm.
in the middle.
Yep.
I see. Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
you found something else to attend to, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Because well, yeah, because whatever's going on inside is so uncomfortable.
Hmm.
This is a way to have something else. It's a distraction of
Hmm.
a kind, it sounds like. Um, But did you enjoy playing chess as well? Did you?
I did. I did. I actually really enjoyed it. And then it started, kind of dying off on me a little bit.
Mm.
And I think when it started dying off, I was just like, oh, snap. Now I really have to face
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
really
It
have to
couldn't keep
face.
the top on it anymore.
Yeah,
And what did you
definitely.
enjoy about the chess? Was it like the strategy, the
No idea. I mean, a part of me was like, yeah, the strategy. I mean, I was just so immersed in like watching chess videos and how
wow.
complex it was. I was actually very fascinated just by the concept of like the king is never
Mhm.
really captured per se.
Mm.
I thought that was actually a very fascinating concept.
It's a bit
Um,
like the ideal you can never reach.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
When you find out that the desired thing is actually something that you'll never reach. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you sound like you're a real you have a really curious, active mind, and you're a real thinker. And, perhaps there was some relief, obviously some relief in just in the general distraction of chess, but also that chess is so complex and you can really fall down that rabbit hole and be very intellectually captured by it.
Mm.
And maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe a sense of having some learning, some like having control. There's a context here that I can start to learn. I can start to learn more and more where I would feel that I'm getting some sort of competency, agency, ability to engage in that context better and better as I learn more and more, versus whatever it was that you're really facing in your life at that moment, which just seemed like this huge unknown ahead of you. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's strange because it's like in general, I think when I look back on like my history, somehow everything works out. Like somehow everything works out. I can't explain it. Somehow everything just works out. So it's very weird. Like you could say even right now I'm going through not quite the same intensity, but it's similar. I mean, because picking something for graduate is a big deal.
Yeah.
This idea of who do I want to work with? Do I want to do this field? Um,
Yeah. A lot of
you
decision
know,
making.
a lot of decision making and all of this. Um, but you could say that for me, it gets difficult to determine. I think you're right. It does have to come down to questioning what is one avoiding, and then what is one because to me, I think it has to do with coping a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and I that's why I'm a little bit resistant against the idea like, oh, it's just a lack of discipline, mainly because I think it's more about no, I think the wheel is going,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
wheel is going, but the wheel is going where, I think, and that's what we would have to explore with the questioning. And I've
Mm.
noticed that when I talk to people sometimes, um you can tell that the wheel gets trapped between two kind of dichotomies.
Hmm.
And if I can give an example of my own life,
Yeah, please.
um, I was telling my buddy about my partner, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't know the difference between letting go and repression."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Why are you only confining it to those two?"
Mm.
But it was a very interesting. But that question kind of like got kind of woke me up to that.
Mm. These
Because I was really
binaries. Hmm.
tormented. Yeah, exactly. I was really tormented by this binary of, well, I can't determine. Is it letting go or is it repression? Like it all kind of looks the same.
Mm.
You could be doing almost the same actions.
Mm. I see.
Unless,
Mm.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say this too reminds me though of the distinction between actions and emotions. So
Mm,
um so when you're talking about letting go and repression, I mean they are, it depends how you're talking about them. Are you talking about an idea that it's possible to choose to say, I notice feeling a certain way and I'm just going to let go of that feeling so that I no longer have it? Because that's impossible.
mm,
We can do lots of things that convince ourselves that we've done that. Um, but can we choose to have an emotion and then can we choose to just make it vanish?
mm.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way I interpret some of my emotions are like uh I think, for example, like I notice how an insecurity, one partner's insecurity can trigger another partner's insecurities,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I've always found very fascinating because it can be a very vicious cycle.
It could be a vicious cycle, but do you see how that can also be an opportunity for for possibility and innovation and creativity. So this is if it's approached in a manner by both people um,
Mm,
that you know this thing that we're highlighting in my behavior also shows us something in yours, and like these are things it gives the relationship can be a context in which you can both start to actually, hate to use this terminology, but work on and improve oneself, but
yeah.
it's done, it can only be done through a trusting, safe relationship like that,
Mm,
where you have a
mm,
context that you can be vulnerable enough to look at those things in yourself, share them with your partner, um, with an understanding, or at least, enough of an understanding that you won't get attacked for it, rejected, humiliated, um, you know, uh, isolated, whatever it is, that's actually fertile ground for growing, for growth, for innovation. It's a way to
mhm,
start to look at yourself anew, but
mhm,
you can only do it in the context of a relationship where you have another person who's able to be there with you in that and not take advantage of that, not
mhm,
weaponize that. Um, but that also in you doing it, there's often a reflection that they exposes something about them too, that they could be doing the same. And actually, if we want
mhm,
to keep this relationship going, which is what we're both here to do, that's going to require something of each of us, and we
mhm.
need to stay in contact about it. And those, I mean,
Yeah.
those sorts of conversations are really, challenging conversations if you haven't done the work to clear out the anxiety that sits on top of a lot of these feelings that come up. So a lot of this boils down as well to anxiety and how
Mhm,
uncomfortable it is, and how motivating it is to us to either, fight, flight, So that's usually what ends up happening in an argument. It's actually about the anxiety that's generated from the feelings as opposed
mhm,
to the feelings themselves.
mhm.
So yes, it can be a vicious cycle if none of that gets looked at
Yeah.
and sort of
100%.
broken down.
Mhm,
But I think there's something about long-term committed relationships that it's actually one of the few contexts in which we can really look at the most confronting parts of ourselves and try
mhm,
to do something about them. That is where something like, rather than discipline, I just tell myself, I'm just never going to do that again, or I'm always going to do.
yeah.
Um, I actually think trying to do that alone is unsuccessful for that. The relationship is the context in which you can start to do that, and you have someone else
Mhm,
there you trust and is safe,
mhm,
um, that can provide feedback into that system as well of what's going on. Does
mhm.
that make sense? But
Yeah, no, I mean,
but it requires such a, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, for example, like my partner gets very insecure because I'm very into philosophy, so she
Mhm.
feels like she has to talk philosophy uh,
Uh,
with me.
I see.
If not, the anxiety is that I'll get bored or I'll
Her?
you know basically leave. And that has to do with a past relationship of hers. Um,
Yeah.
but I noticed that in some sense I kind of I kind of gave her the sense of I gave her this idea. I said I would like to be able to talk philosophy with you without um, without the binary without the thing that you associate with it.
Mm. Tell me more.
Or I said, because she was afraid of a couple of things. She was afraid that if I stopped talking philosophy, that would be the indicator of the decaying of the relationship. And then I proposed to her. I said, what if we entertain this other way, which is maybe I stop talking philosophy, but it doesn't mean what you associate it to.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I was like, because, one part for me, I know that she takes philosophy as like such a consumptive part of me. Um, but I was like, for me, philosophy is also just like this thing that I do.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think it's all me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was telling her that I was like, I don't think that y you have to be worried that you're not accessing a missed part of me by not engaging in this topic.
Mm, mm,
I was like, you love sports, I love this. To me, I see the same,
mm,
but I understand how you feel about, one looking more important than the other.
mhm.
Um, but but basically,
Mm.
weirdly enough, in talking about this, um, I still talk philosophy with her, but I started watching sports with her.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah,
just
there
started
you go. It just
happening.
started happening. And
Yeah,
how's
it
that
started happening.
going?
It's going good. It's going good. I mean, I'm starting to actually kind of like basketball. And I enjoy watching it with her actually.
Yeah.
So
You feel more connected as a result?
yeah, yeah, and we've been watching some shows together, having other things to talk about as well. Um, I think she somehow that conversation I think turned into her initiating conversations about things that she's read.
Hmm.
She's telling me some economic theory that she was talking about with me, and I don't really know anything about economic theory, but I was, you know, it, I think for her, the reason why she struggles with me is because she doesn't know what to say,
Mm.
and it kind of reveals to her a kind of power dynamic
Uh-huh.
of
Well, she's
either that I could take
fearful.
advantage, I
Yeah.
could I could do some philosophical manipulation or something,
Uh-huh.
um, and win arguments. And
Hmm.
that's a very hard thing. But I basically said something like, trust is something that's very groundless. I was like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
trust is something that's very groundless because I was like, you know, there's nothing I could do that you could not flip the script on me.
Mm.
Like that's what a liar would do. You
Yeah.
can do endless
It's
associations
true
with
for
this.
everyone. It's true for every
Yeah.
relationship. It sounds
Hmm.
like some of this is
Yeah.
is just the anxiety that rises as
Hmm.
as she gets closer and closer to you, as the two of you get closer and closer. There's a
Hmm.
lot more at stake. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
for something to happen and to
Hmm.
lose that would be a lot more painful. And
Hmm.
then, I think you bringing in the previous relationship, this is for everybody. This isn't just about your partner. Like
Yeah.
obviously previous relationships of all kinds, your romantic relationships, but then you take it right down, you take it right down usually to the attachment figures, to, people in your childhood who you had those first meaningful relationships with, set templates of how these things go. And those templates are unconscious, they're not conscious. And
Hmm.
so they show up emotionally, and they show up in terms of anxiety, and that's what we experience maybe, but we don't experience sort of the talking through in our head of, oh, that's because this person is reminding me of my father, and when my father used to do this, I did.
Hmm.
That's not
Yeah.
there. We just know
Yeah.
the other part of it. And so there is something to be said for being able to do some deeper psychodynamic therapy that clears out some of that residue
Hmm.
so that you can see the other person more clearly. Um, does that make sense? So that when you're interacting with your partner now, the emotional response you're having is less so leftovers about someone else and
Hmm.
more about the reality, if you can call it that, of what's happening in the here and now. There'll always be some of that residue, I think. I don't
Hmm.
think it's
Yeah.
gone for
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think her and I even talked about this. We're like, I think we acknowledge we're like, yeah, I think there's always going to be some anxiety. I think it's just it's going to be there.
Mhm.
But what has been helpful is being aware of it,
Yes.
about
Yes.
each other's anxiety. Like, I know that if I do certain things, that it might incline her to do it, and it's possible that she might not have the awareness at the moment to
Mm.
catch it, and so,
Mm.
but at least I do, and so I can kind of mitigate around that. But
I just think the
um,
fact that the two of you are able to speak about these things openly with one another, and that they can be constructive and caring conversations, they're conversations
mhm,
with the intent to get closer, not to
mhm,
blame
mhm,
or, push the other away or
mhm.
protect your own vantage point.
Yeah,
That's
that's
key, right? How
yeah.
can we get closer? Mm.
I mean, yeah, that's what I want to bring up because when I had feelings like this, you could say, my first instincts were like blame or anger or whatever, but I just knew that it wasn't true. True is maybe not the best word, but
Yeah. Didn't seem
I,
actually relevant to what was going on.
yes, I felt like there was a level of there's something happening for sure. The question is she really the target?
Yeah, that's it.
That's
Are
that
these
that's
feelings
really the
really
question.
about her?
Yeah, all those, and that's why when I had framed the question, is it letting go or is it repression?
I see.
It was me realizing this moment
Mm.
of I notice myself getting angry and I want to be angry at a
Oh, I
specific
see.
person. Yeah. But then I started realizing, like, okay, but is that actually what it is? Because I feel like there's something deeper going on, and that perhaps it's really not anger. And what I've discovered with my anger is usually with anger, there's usually a deep kind of sadness beneath anger.
Well, it's often
So
a hurt, isn't it? It's that you've been an
mhm,
idea, a sense you've been hurt, you're in pain.
mhm,
Someone hurts you, and a response then is to have anger,
mhm,
being hurt.
mhm,
So
mhm,
sometimes noticing the hurt, noticing the sadness underneath, and
mhm,
inquiring about that. Yeah, definitely. But when you even when you talk about anger, it's really important to get clear on the distinction between just having the noticing the feeling inside. I think it's
mhm.
great that you can notice the feeling of anger, but I think the question starts to be, do I want to bring that into my actions or not?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the
So
question.
what would it be
Mhm.
to be angry? What does that mean for you?
Oh man, anger is the emotion that I have like the most neophyte relationship with.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hardest one for most people, anger.
yeah, because I think for me, anger always resulted in embarrassment.
Ah. If
You
you
know,
felt
it was
anger or if someone was angry at you, you mean?
if I was angry and like I would lash out or something, it would always result in embarrassment because it would result in a like most anger situations were really a misunderstanding.
Oh, I see.
Really. Most of my interactions were a misunderstanding,
Mhm.
right? So then it
I
makes
see.
me, you could say, a little bit more embarrassed to even feel angry. And then you're just like, well, then what do I do with this emotion?
Mm.
But then
I
I
see.
started, you could say when I was younger, I strictly avoided it, which was bad.
Mm.
Um,
How
but
would
then
you
I
avoid
started,
it? What would you do? What is that? So you'd notice the feeling,
well,
then you'd distract yourself?
yeah, I think avoiding it was more like going mute and just
I see.
trying to let
Just
it
more.
just dissipate. But of course, it never dissipated. It would result in eruptions.
This is it. Yeah. It's like trying to keep
Yeah.
the lid on something, keep the lid
Mhm,
on something, and
mhm,
eventually it becomes so agitated it comes out. And
mhm,
that's usually with the anxiety. When we do that with anger and
mhm,
we wait and we wait and we wait and we try to
mhm,
pretend it's not there.
yeah,
Once it comes out, what forces it to come out is
mhm,
that it becomes mixed up with anxiety. And so actually it's the
mhm,
anxious discharge that usually leads to
mhm,
the behavior that we then regret, that we have
mhm.
remorse over or we feel embarrassed about, or it's the manner in which we let the other person know that we're angry as opposed to the anger itself, letting them know that we're angry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and that's when I learned that actually, like, you know, how you show your anger is kind of like a skill. Like,
Yeah.
but it was one of those things that I realized that I was just like, well, crap. Like I should have been practicing my anger. I should have been like allowing myself to get angry, and then
How would you ever
letting.
know? How
Yeah,
would you ever know in that? This
I
is
know, I know. It's a very retrospective account.
mm,
But I think when I started reading philosophy, actually,
mm,
because there's a part of philosophy that is kind of aggressive, that I started realizing, like, I don't have to I don't have to get like visibly upset.
yeah.
Philosophy now has given me a language to articulate what bothers me, without being so crude or
Yeah, yeah.
insulting sometimes. But sometimes I notice that it helps just to be like, I didn't like that.
Right. That's right.
That
'Cause that's
bothered
all it is,
me,
really, right?
or I don't, I would even tell my friends like, I know that you probably didn't mean it this way, but I'm noticing that I'm taking it another way,
Yeah.
I'm
But
getting
that's it.
offended, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So I think even if we take it back to, like the romantic relationship, if you can get to a place where you can even just share with the other person that I notice feeling really angry when you do that.
Hmm.
I notice inside feeling really angry, and you might not even know why, but just that is this like almost as a starting point of you can even take it to the point of how interesting to notice that I feel so angry in response to you doing this, and just
Hmm.
have more of a conversation about like I recognize that you just did X, Y, and Z, and yet there's such a huge response inside me,
Hmm.
and I'm not really sure why that is. Like you can be with the other person in the exploring what goes on inside, rather than it's like keeping the other person informed as opposed to waiting, thinking we can control and manage everything inside, keeping it very private and quiet. And then
Hmm.
it reaches a certain threshold where it just jumps out. And then I think we do lose more of our ability to yeah, to reflective to decide what we want to do with our actions from that higher level place. Because once the
Hmm.
anxiety gets so great, it forces it out of us in these very primal, um, regressive ways, as
Hmm.
opposed to allowing us to bring online the higher order thinking. So the higher order thinking helps, and that's where philosophy will definitely help you. It gives you
Hmm.
language to put to what's going on inside. Um, but there is also a vulnerability in sharing with someone how you feel when you don't even know why you would feel that way. Like just to say the words without even having the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I noticed the connection for myself. I mean, it definitely goes back actually because I had it was a really interesting encounter with my mother, having like a child perspective and then now having the adult, a re-encounter with my
Mm.
mother.
When was this?
Where
Did you say a week? Did you say?
this was like a couple months ago
Okay.
actually, and I was very flustered by this, but it was good because it allowed me to see that I had imposed had it, you could say I kind of had like a little super ego as a child.
Mhm.
That I had this notion that I could not express certain emotions to my mother because
Mm.
my mother was a single mother,
Mm.
and I was very aware of what was happening. I was very aware of her situation.
That it was
Single
stressful, you
mother,
mean?
yeah, stressful, divorce, raising two boys.
Yeah,
Um, my little brother was a little bit more chaotic,
right.
and just that me noticing that as a child, being receptive to that entire situation, I was just like, okay, um, I don't want to cause any trouble, right?
Mm.
So by
Yeah.
virtue, I was very
Mm.
kind of stoic, you could say. Um, and then as I realized that I carried all these things, and I realized that not only did I carry that with my mother, but I also carried that with the people where I'm just like,
Yeah.
I don't want them to feel any type of way by me expressing this emotion,
Yeah.
by me making it worse for them or something.
You don't want to
Um,
burden them with it. You don't want,
yeah, yeah,
cause them any more stress.
yeah, it felt like a very much like a burden to them.
Wow.
And finally, when this was like what, yeah, about 5 months ago.
Mm.
Um, my mother, I was so upset. Like, I don't know what happened, but everything came out. And my mother goes, this was such a good comment from my mother. My mother goes, I'm like blaming her. I'm upset.
Mm.
I'm just, just going full out. And she goes, I'm sorry. She's like, but how would I have known? you know? And I think it was at that moment that I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, how could she have known? And then the more brutal part was, uh, then now what do I do with the emotion?
Yeah.
That was, I think, because I think for a lot of people,
Yeah.
it's nice to have a target,
Hmm.
but then when the person that is your target goes, but I couldn't have known. You were a child, you weren't speaking, you weren't expressing.
Mhm.
I tried to guess. I did the best that I could.
Mhm.
And then, you know,
And yet it still wasn't enough though.
yeah, and then it still wasn't enough. Exactly.
But
And then
can
you're
it be
left with
both?
these
This is it.
emotions.
Does there have to be a choice? Can't it be
Huh?
both? I guess what comes up in my mind is, can't it be both? Does there really
Mm,
have to be a choice? It goes back to your binary.
mm,
And I think
mm,
you're talking about it, that you can still have feelings what
mm.
for what you needed that you didn't get. For what, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
And that you can still notice where the target. Hmm.
Yeah. No, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
No, no. I think that's kind of like what I acknowledged, which was like,
But
yeah,
there's
the
also
feelings are real,
the feelings are real. There's also a
but
pain, though, I think, that you're noticing about the cost of
mm,
that strategy that you, as such a
mhm,
young child, were adopted. Whether we say you had to adopt it, however you want to look at it, there was something inside that realized, I need to learn to manage this, because bringing
mhm,
this into the relationship is going to do something, right? So for
yeah.
whatever reason a decision gets made, that this is the best way to deal with feelings of anger, perhaps feelings of all kind that might not be so acceptable, might not be easily integrated into the relationship. And so I will just deal with them by myself, and I will just go quiet and small and not reveal them to anyone when they come up inside me. But
Mm,
that's incredibly isolating for you.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's
Yeah.
a pain too, I think, that comes from a recognition that that template that, like you say, then probably gets applied to every relationship, means that only half of you is present.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Which is, like, I'm not trying to say that it's true of, most people,
Yeah.
almost everyone. And also,
Yeah.
I should say, is not, I'm sure is something that is a very helpful thing in a lot of relationships. But to be able to choose actually to have certain relationships where I'm not going to do that, where actually I'm going to let this person see all of me or much more of me, which includes these very private experiences that go on inside that I don't even yet know how to make sense of. I don't even have to do the philosophy on it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
think, yeah, because like after that event, I think I noticed that I was just like, yeah. I mean, I was telling my partner about it, obviously, but
Oh, yeah.
I was like, yeah, I don't, I mean, I think it really is just like expressing it. I mean, as odd as that is, it's just expressing it, to my partner.
And
Of course,
trusting how they'll hold it, though, trusting how they're going to receive it. That's the vulnerability.
yes, yes, that I thought that was absolutely key.
Because if this
That
is
was
the
key.
template, right? If this is the unconscious template that if I express these things, that's going to burden the other person, they've already got enough going on.
Mhm,
And then, the thinking through of then how you imagine they're going to see you or respond to you. And
mhm.
that doesn't sound like a great decision, does it? If that were to be true.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
in terms of them rejecting you or pushing you away or disconnecting you.
yeah, I mean, I think, when I had done a lot of my kind of like philosophical thinking on trust, I was able to finally connect it.
Mm,
That I was just like, yeah, I mean, I've thought about it intellectually,
mm.
but now the emotions really make the concept concrete,
Yeah.
right? Because now I can see that trust, I mean, you cannot, there is no ground other than the very trust that you are depending on anyways to make this move.
Yeah.
So it's a risk. It's a risk. And
True.
I started understanding that it is a risk, but it's a risk, but it's precisely because I chose to trust this person that, maybe not, but
Well,
actually
that's
one of
it.
my best friends.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, when you do the different thing, though, when you step out
Yeah.
of the template and you choose to take
Mm,
that risk,
yeah.
that is again opening up to possibility, to something anew that you can create here, right? And
Mhm,
so it is going to be yeah, it's a scarier choice rather than the
mhm,
consistency afforded by, I know how this goes with people, so I know my part and what I have to do to keep this as okay as possible and just keep things moving along, right? But to choose to go
mhm.
against that there's going to be conflictual forces inside you about that.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my best friend actually, he it was a very wonderful conversation because I was expressing that uh I was expressing that he upset me, and I was like, and then he got up, he got offended and upset, and I was like, see, this is why I didn't want to do this. And then my friend goes, yeah, but sometimes that happens. Like, he's
Amazing,
like,
huh? Yeah,
right,
it
yeah,
doesn't have to break the relationship.
yeah, he framed it in such a way that it really woke me up, in the sense. He goes, yeah, I'm hurt, but
Yeah,
um, it, he goes, but it's both, meaning your feelings are real,
yeah,
my feelings are real. We hurt each other, and
yeah.
yeah, but that
How
doesn't mean
wonderful we
that you.
can talk about it.
Yeah, wonderful. We could talk. That's
How
right.
wonderful we can be with each other in that and just
Mm,
have it actually maybe be again a connecting experience.
hmm.
It's a show of trust actually and vulnerability that you can show up and tell someone that, sit with them
Mm,
and their expression back at you of the same thing, and that neither of you get up and walk away and say, I want nothing to do with you anymore. Right. That
yeah.
is the show, and that's the bringing the love in. So
Mm,
this is the integration of I can have both these painful, angry feelings towards you, and at the same time notice the love I feel. The love is the part that keeps you wanting to keep building this connection. I don't want this to be something that means we never have anything to do with each other again. That's why I bring it up. If I just
mhm,
notice anger inside, and that's enough of a signal for me to say I'm having nothing to do with that person again, because I don't believe there should be anger in close, intimate relationships, I don't need to have a conversation with them about it. I just stop talking to them. Right. So
mhm,
the fact that you're even willing to try to bring it into the relationship can be a signal that I also have love here. I want this to grow and build. I want this to be connecting. But to do that, I have to tell you what's going on inside. You might not like it. It might be uncomfortable for me to say it. You might have your own
mhm,
reaction to it, which I don't like hearing. But we also have love and a commitment to be trying to connect through it. This is a
mhm.
connecting activity, not
Yeah.
a disconnecting one. That's the trick. And through
Mhm.
doing that, that is how you start to build new models of relationships. You actually start to get away from your history. This is that possibility piece. This is the only way something new can emerge, that you can develop a new relationship to your feelings through the context of that relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, it
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
perfect sense. I mean, it's really the only thing that the sites of creativity can emerge with those possibilities. And I think I think a lot of my experiences, just struggling through that, to kind of prove that's true.
Mm.
Um, but slightly switching it
Yeah, yeah, go. Yeah.
to negative pragmatism, right? This
Yes.
this word, this
Yes,
word,
that's
right?
what we hear. Yeah.
This word, I do think it's connected to something like this.
Yeah.
I think it's connected to something like this. That's why I'm a little bit hesitant about uh, that it's a matter of doing, in terms of, you could say, what is really being done, with this lack,
Mm,
right? Because I think in the examples and everything that you brought up, the one thing that seems to be lacking is the very thing that we are withholding from expression, you
hmm
could say, right? The very thing that is arising, is is the thing that somehow threatens. And I think lack, if we say emotions, maybe something analogous to lack, maybe.
mm,
Because I do think in trust there is a kind of just lack in general. I mean, there's trust is just, you just have to trust. I mean, the ground is so groundless, precisely because you just need the other person to trust you,
mm,
right? So I think it's this kind of relationship that, um, when we talk about doing, I
mm.
wonder if it's more about, doing together,
Yeah.
negative pragmatism,
Yes.
in this case, because uh, this idea of the culture, people doing their cold showers and their productivity and
Without knowing
failing, and
why. It's just good
yeah,
for you. Good for
without
you.
really knowing why.
Mhm.
Um, it I think it would make sense why there is you could say that they call this the age of anxiety, and then the meaning crisis and so on, um, because when productivity gets in the way of relating,
Mm, mhm, mhm.
I wonder if it's more about the fact that we could do because we can relate. That's what I was getting from this conversation. And
Mm.
we could actually do precisely because we relate. We can relate.
Relating is primary.
Relating is primary in this case instead of doing.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
Hmm.
And sometimes relating with someone almost requires no doing. So it
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
be the
Yeah.
sitting with the
Hmm.
fact that I'm not, the fact that I still choose to be here. I'm not getting up and leaving. Like just the being in it,
Hmm.
the being there. Um, I think relating is primary.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but relating is so closely bound up to how open and vulnerable can you be with the emotions, right, that are there.
Hmm.
That is what relating is, like it's
Hmm.
it's it's being open to the emotions that the other person is sharing that they're having. That
Hmm.
creates our own, anxieties and emotions, and then our own emotional state. That's really hard work. That's really, really difficult, challenging, confronting work that is sealed under a fog of all our early templates, all the anxiety that causes when they're being activated, and then all these other defenses we build on top of the anxiety to try to just keep away from the anxiety, let alone the emotions that sit underneath. It's really like an archaeological dig.
Yeah.
And you can
Yes.
do that in a relationship, but it has to be a particular, relationship for that to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a whole different pace to that, even as I say that. Like that's not, quick wake up scheduled, 9 o'clock, have my cold shower, like do it as fast as like all efficiency, productivity, like these are all different.
Mhm.
Um, it's a completely, yeah, it's just got a completely different style to it. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and yeah, the productivity thing obviously has its place, but I
Yeah.
think it functions as this huge defensive mechanism against noticing the power and importance of relating, of the emotional, um, and almost pretends it's not there, pretends it's not there, or that it's somehow we can override it.
Mhm.
'Cause
I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense because, I watch a lot of like dating, like pop culture on YouTube,
yeah,
and a lot of the exchanges that happen is a lot of the words is high value, self-sufficient. I'm a boss woman, or
oh yeah.
I'm a man that is
Mm.
high value, and
One
it's I
strike and
get,
you're out.
yeah, right, one strike and you're out, and there is this ideal that is productivity is strictly linked to self-sufficiency.
Mm,
And
mm,
I think that is the key to understand why it might be a cope.
mm.
This idea of a pure self-sufficiency,
Yeah.
that is connected to productivity. Why did productivity have to be related to self-sufficiency?
Mm.
Because that seems so counterintuitive, and yet it's sold as the very thing that would promise you
Because it
self-sufficiency.
keeps the other at bay.
Yes. Yeah.
If I am the kind of producer that is acceptable to society, to the other, to however we want to look at it, that's a way to keep me safe. It's all ultimately relational, even though people don't want to, see that. I do it so that I keep safe from my, fears, anxieties of the other hurting me, right?
Mhm.
I just think it all boils down to the same thing. Rather, maybe you could actually go down there and have a look at your fears and anxieties about others hurting you do some work around that so that you might be able to start to address it so that you don't have to always be in hyper-productive mode as a way
Mhm.
to avoid noticing that actually I am scared to be in deep, meaningful relationships because I'm scared of if we make it very general, because I'm scared of other people because other people can hurt me, right? Like, I mean, and this is a human condition. The 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 yearning for the attempt to be in relationship with another person, to find a relationship, right, a romantic relationship. Um, this is all really, if we go back to the drives, I just think this is all really about trying to return to a state of oneness that we can never have, that we'll never
Mhm.
have, right?
Mhm.
Um, with another person. Um, but we can still use that drive to try and learn more and more about ourselves, but to see how close we can also get to another. But that's all linked to emotions and very slow, vulnerable, trusting work with someone else. I mean, if you call it work, in a state of being, with another person that is, it's completely different to, yes, like a very linear plan of how I progress in my career and make myself high value and, produce in a way that's acceptable and keeps everyone away from me, but also in awe of me, helps me to ascend in the hierarchy, all these things.
Mhm.
um I've gone sideways there, haven't I?
No, no, you're good. No, you're nailing all the stuff about why those things are copes, and but also it shows why it's so brutal to have relation first,
Yeah.
why it's so hard to have relation first. And it's one of those things that when I started reading philosophy,
Mm,
I felt that I couldn't keep it to myself.
mm,
But I think, and this is where I started realizing that it was what I started enjoying about philosophy was actually philosophy reminded me what I enjoy most is actually talking to people.
yeah, yeah,
It's I mean the philosophy stuff is always going to be
yeah, yeah.
more perennial questions, more things I don't know. We can always talk about those things, but what I enjoyed the most was having conversations, and I could just have conversations. And I once I have a conversation, I feel like something is really being fulfilled.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's
there's
connection.
something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're not doing anything productive in the sense that we would associate productivity. You're just
You're
talking and
exploring. You're
you're
exploring.
exploring. Yeah,
It is, it's exploration.
yeah,
And not knowing where you're going to get to at the end,
yeah.
right? And it's a completely, yeah, it's a shift. It's a completely different thing. But you're right. So like philosophy afforded you at least the ground on which to have connection. That maybe also, I don't know, but maybe also did it at a level that um kept your emotions at a level that was okay for you, like that felt
Mm-hmm.
okay. But then if obviously that shifts. If you're with your partner and you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about things, would you only ever talk at that level? Or
Mm-hmm.
are there other kinds of conversations too that you want to be able to have with her that would still, yeah, lead to
Yeah.
connection? So
Mm.
addressing the emotional, it's not. And I think that just goes back to your earlier point around, that you don't have to just talk to her about philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. And like weirdly enough, I still kind of do, but
Yeah.
uh it's a little different, It's I think having that conversation kind of triggered something.
Mm.
But yeah, I think, just
But I guess I mean, I'm guessing here because I'm just filling in gaps. So tell me if I'm wrong.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, maybe part of what shifted is just a
Mhm.
recognition that she was fearful that she had to meet you at the same level when you discussed it. Otherwise, you would reject her. Whereas maybe when you talk about it now, it's just sharing an interest that you have, like a way of giving her a portal into what's going on for you, and your
Mhm.
interests, and not that she has to respond in kind. It's more, here's what I'm doing in here's what's going on in the way that I'm thinking right now about the stuff that I like. It's a sharing. without her having to
Yeah.
meet you so at the same level. It's not an evaluation of her and her ability to, is that right?
So I think she consciously acknowledges that it's a sharing, but I can see that sometimes she still struggles with
Mm.
it might be more there's still feelings of insufficiency sometimes.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I think I usually she's very pragmatic. So when I talk heady
Mm.
intellectual things, her responses are like, "What's the point of this? What good does this do?"
Hmm.
Um, and actually I did have one good conversation with her about lack because I said I'm curious, do you make a distinction between absence and lack?
Mm.
And she goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I saw a blender on the counter, so I was like, if the blender goes missing, would you say that you lack a blender, or would you say that the blender's gone?"
Mm.
And then she's like, "Well, I would say that it's missing." I was like, okay, but would you say that what is lack for you in this case?
Mm. Mm.
Or is there a distinction? And
Mm.
then she goes, "Well, I guess if I wanted to make a smoothie, I would say that I lack the materials." I said, "Yes, yes,
Mm.
yes, 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 perfect." I said, now I'm going to connect this to a more psychological concept.
Mhm.
And I said, the problem that I have with taking lack as nothing
Mm.
is that people go from meaning something, meaninglessness to nothing.
Mhm.
I said, what if meaninglessness or this feeling that we attach to the concept of meaninglessness is actually not that there's no meaning, but that
Can't
there
find,
is an insufficiency of meaning.
can't find, yeah.
you know, uh,
Yeah. Current meaning falls short. My
yeah,
current understanding is not enough.
yeah,
It
yeah,
exposes something that is lacking. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that sense, she grabbed onto it, and I said that's why this concept is important to me because I can see that just this reorientation kind of matters a
Mm.
lot.
Mm.
Because going from something to nothing is it's very if that's the limit of your language,
Mm.
that could destroy some people, I
So
would
it's like a
think.
relationship.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
is, right?
yeah,
Like this is the
yeah,
same thing. It's a
yeah,
parallel.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, it's a
yeah,
parallel.
yeah.
Mhm,
It's the can, yeah, is there an opportunity here to notice that current understanding, current meaning making mechanisms, right, are falling short. They can't account for this. Something
mhm,
is lacking. Can we be in
mhm.
that together, right?
Yes.
As a lack as opposed to a, well, it must be wrong, right? Like, or it must just be, like just the sort of the ending, the
Mhm,
walking away. Actually, maybe this exposes something in us that is lacking, that is,
mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a
That is what you do with this is part of what you do with the lack, right? Like how, well,
yeah,
I think this goes back to what you're talking about, this negative pragmatism.
yeah, yeah, a bit. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just didn't connect it to relations, actually. I think that's what's been helpful about this conversation is that perhaps the relation is more central than the
Mm.
doing. And maybe that's the negative part, right? It's we're doing the relation, which is
Mm.
fundamentally not really you could
Yeah.
say a doing in the productivity sense, but there is something being done.
Mm.
Um, but it has to do with the relating is being done. The
There's a
relating is
humility, yeah, but there's a humility
Mhm.
too that goes with this. There's the
Mhm.
expectation there will be lack. There is,
Mm.
um, as opposed to, I think, like when you're talking about the sort of dating stuff that currently in the like, I'm a high value individual, and they're like,
Yeah,
you know, it's like the pendulum swings too far the other way, and
it does.
now it's one strike and you're out, and like um, it's there's no acknowledgement that it's also the acknowledgement that because of, I think it's because of lack, because because we are two separate individuals and we will, right, never be able to enter into the other person's head, anticipate what they're feeling, what's going on, and vice versa. It will always be messy. It will always be messy, and any relationship that goes on for any length of time that has a certain depth to it, right, that's required for it to be meaningful, any relationship like that necessarily will involve hurt and will involve, dealing with hurting the other person, causing pain, letting them down, feeling guilty, and vice versa. They will let you down. They'll step on your toes. They'll do things wrong, right? That is always exposing to us the frustration that we cannot be, that we are lacking, that we will never be able to have the desired object as well.
Mm.
I think it does link back to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
We will
And
never
it's,
be at one, right?
yeah,
There is always a divide. And
it's,
yeah. And so there is a desire, I think, to avoid experiencing that sensation that is going on
yeah.
with this
And it,
productivity and this hyper independence. I don't even need anyone, and I only
Mhm.
need someone if they look at me and always tell me I'm high worth and I'm fabulous and I'm never at fault, and they never trigger me, hurt me, like all of this stuff. Anytime those things happen, it's over, it's done, right?
Even certain forms of spirituality have kind of
Yeah,
gone this route
same
too.
thing, same thing.
And I think it's because, lack as the very thing that allows us to have a relation
Mm.
is also the very thing that we don't want to
That's it.
have,
That's
right?
exactly
That's
it.
it.
That's the
That's exactly.
conflict. That's
And
it.
and yet, ironically, you could say all our behaviors, all our failed productivities, all our failed ideals is precisely that we do want that relation, but it's because that is too brutal that we have conceptualized in our minds that that is what we don't want. Um,
If we have no training to be with emotions and anxiety that will fundamentally come with trying to
mhm,
relate on that level with someone, then that's extra force away from experiencing it. But to get to a place where you have more confidence, this is where I think you can do work, conscious work,
okay.
to build up a conscious confidence that when those feelings and anxieties show up, I can be with them. They don't have to destruct relationship. Actually, this might be an opportunity. This is an opportunity now for us to continue to grow our connection. It also helps me as an individual to grow. Like this is all that growth possibility. That last conversation
Mhm.
I was watching you have. I think this is pointing to that. Um, even though so even though I'm choosing to continue to relate and be in this relationship, knowing that, it's being driven also by a force that's trying to get me to a place I'm never going to be able to get to with this person. Um, in showing up and doing it, it also gives rise to all this other type of growth, if we want to call it that, innovation, creativity. But the relationship is necessary for that because it's what helps trigger the feelings in us and the anxiety in us that can give rise to those things, that we can sit and wrestle with those together. And when I say wrestle, it doesn't mean aggressively, but be with that together, in an
Yeah.
integrated way that brings love in, which is the essential ingredient here too. This is why it
Mhm.
doesn't turn into just, people repeatedly hurting each other for no reason. Um, it's necessary. That is actually, in my mind, where true creativity um, and innovation comes from. It's not just this other realm. I don't know. Yeah, anyway, it is primary to me, this relational piece.
Yeah, and I think this talk is making me think like it's making me reframe like how Daniel's like, well, he's thinking through the problem of like how do we get people to leave the cave on their own? This conversation is striking to me that maybe we don't leave the cave on our own,
Mm, yeah,
that actually we leave the cave together.
yeah,
Um, but
yeah,
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 uh,
yeah, good
we leave
point.
the caves together. Because I don't see, I don't, I think the individuality part, I mean,
Why would we leave it alone? Yeah.
why would we, that's yes, why would we want to leave it alone?
Mhm.
And what would make us yeah, I mean, I think this is something that I told my partner. I said, I told her from the beginning. I said, this was actually something I'm glad that we did.
Mm.
I said, whatever rules that couples have, I'm not interested in that.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
said, I said, I'm interested in you and I constructing the rules together, and whatever that becomes, and
beautiful.
then we'll just, whatever works doesn't work, we'll provision and redo and make new
Yeah,
rules and throw away old rules. And
it's a
I
commitment to
was like,
building already.
yeah, yeah. And I said, because if we come into this thinking that I know how this works
Mm.
and that you should behave a certain way because you're so and so, and I should behave a certain way because I'm
Mm.
so and so. I was like, I think we're really missing out on the possible ways that we could live together.
Yeah, you're already so constrained.
Hmm. And
Mhm.
it was right there that I was like, actually, I don't know if you've read, uh, I got this idea actually.
Mm.
Badu has a book on love.
Who
I
does?
think it, uh, Alan Badu.
Oh yeah,
I think
Badu.
it's,
Yeah,
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 Badu.
yeah.
He's got a book on love, and it's a very short book, but it's so good because he talks about,
I have
you
the
know,
book and I've read half.
I love the book. I
Yeah,
think it was so brilliantly put because he said, yeah, you once you become two, now you have to figure out how you build a world as two. And that's the creative side right there.
that's
But
it.
of course, I mean, he doesn't go into the negativity part that much, but to me, it's that negativity that's building
Mm.
um, that
Mm.
part. And if you're refraining from that, then you're not building.
Yes, yes. And it's a
Mm,
site from which you can get clearer about your own self-delusions. The idea that you're
yeah.
going to sit by yourself and remain, by yourself, kind of, outside of relationship and do all of that. Um, when you take the unconscious into consideration, is a much harder task. You have a partner who is also able to help you with your own self-delusion and vice versa. And so you're also continuing to reveal more and more about yourself, which, yeah, it's such fertile ground. The relationship is just, I mean, this is why therapy is a thing, that it's two people, that it's not just a self-help book. Um,
Mhm,
because to have the other person is vital. It's
mhm,
vital. Um, mm. But this is, I think
mhm.
we're only getting into it now. Like, I feel like we've sort of set the stage, and now I really feel now something's really coming together, at least from my end.
I think it's really framing it for me now. It's
Mm.
funny because I think this is precisely why I loved Uber, actually.
Yeah.
He had predicted this in the I Now that if life was just which is just, reducing people to attributes and objects and things and productivity and schemas,
Mm.
that we would be missing out on the world of relation.
Yes.
So how do we bring that back? That I think is a part of negative pragmatism, maybe. Um, exploring that, or at least exploring that on a micro level. Like these communities and our personal relationships.
One thing that comes to mind as you say that with the negative pragmatism piece is the question of, um, how is it that I can be with you in relationship with you, knowing that, um, there's a drive within me which you will never fulfill, right? Like that, right. And yet still choose to stay with you and want to be in it
Hmm.
anyway, even though it will constantly be revealing lack, I guess is what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
how can I, but choose to stay in it anyway, like, right, and not to just see that as a signal of disconnect, find someone else or just be by myself, right? That there is
Hmm.
something still about the being in it together and the noticing of lack along the way together that does something at like that there's a something there.
Hmm.
Right? And when we're talking about this as being the side of creativity, of possibility and um
Yeah.
But I think the awareness to that, that is how, that if you're thinking about how to be with lack,
Yeah.
um, you be with it with another person
Hmm.
in a context where it's constantly being revealed to one another that
Hmm.
it's there, um,
Hmm.
and yet that you can still continue to love and be with one another and still be building something. And that's not a signal to disconnect. It's not a signal to now go and find it elsewhere. And there's obviously a time to leave a relationship if you need to, but like
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a sign that there's something wrong,
Hmm.
but it might be a state that's uncomfortable and that you can still use somehow, if we call it use, in the relationship to continue to build, to create, to does that does that help?
Yeah, I mean, you're posing this problem of why I think this would be really difficult.
Mm.
Right? Like, you know, of obviously just saying like relating and just doing this relating, what would make a person come back? I think that really is like the
What makes you
fundamental
come back to
question.
conversations about philosophy, even though you don't get your final answer at the end? What makes you come back?
I don't know,
Mm.
actually. I mean, I mean, there's a part of me that just deeply enjoys it. I
Mhm.
can't help it, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Um,
the
and and I think there's definitely a part of the repetition
Mhm.
that works itself in there. I mean, it's so crazy that, I experienced this in the army, and I know we're trying to wrap up, but
Mhm. Okay.
this idea of being around each other constantly. Like Daniel's net session is a perfect example of a group of people repetitively meeting,
I
and
know.
then
I want
suddenly,
to be there, but it's so early for me. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
then suddenly something happens, right? Some people have gotten emotional, some people have gone
Oh.
revealed, deeper things. Um, and then suddenly, when you think the conversation might get so boring, like what are we going to talk about today? What could we possibly talk about today? And then yet there's always something to talk about. And it's always engaging. So yeah, I mean, I think it does require a kind
Openness.
of just like, yeah, I mean, I think maybe a faith, maybe that's the word, a kind of faith
Okay.
of meeting again,
Agreed.
doing this repetition of meeting again, and not perhaps really understanding
Mm.
why you're doing this, why it keeps happening, and I think the work is being done. There's something
That is
being
the
done.
productivity, though. See, like that is the kind of product, like it's generative,
Hmm.
I think. It's like it's something comes from it, from your engagement with it, and not letting I guess not letting the lack be a signal to disconnect. Um,
Hmm.
mm, mm. It's the connection too, though, right? Like there is like, when you were talking about just having conversations about philosophy with people, and then noticing afterwards that sense of connection and having connected with someone. Right?
Hmm.
There's a satisfaction, there's a feeling state that goes with that as well. And I mean, I always call it a nourishment,
Yeah, no, it
even
really
when
is.
even if it's hard, there is
Mhm.
something, yeah, reinforcing about it.
I think even when I left, I definitely left certain groups. I mean, because I wasn't, there was something was missing,
Mhm.
you could say. Something was definitely missing. And then finally, I met Daniel and all them, and um, I just noticed that it just kept returning, right? It wasn't a question of should I show up today? Should I not show up today? You just found yourself returning.
The trust. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
trust was being established before really cognizing
yeah,
trust.
yeah. Yeah, but you only get that after a certain level of continuing to engage, right? So this sort of even
Hmm.
goes back to something like a first date, like,
Hmm.
or even just it's not even a first date anymore. Sorry, a first viewing of someone's photo momentarily. Like that's going to tell you everything you need to know emotionally, and then just forget the rest. There is a certain level of groundwork, and I think that comes back to recognizing that our emotional responses are not always clear. Like there could be all sorts of stuff that's jamming them
Mhm.
up. And so it takes some time for us to really be with another person to get a clearer sense of what's going
Mhm.
on here. That's not just about my own defensive structure. It's not just about, my past attachment figures, getting clearer about the person that's here.
I wonder if the trick is more about suspending judgment and allowing the
Yeah.
thing to do its work. Because even like on first dates, I was always like a very overthinker. So I'd be like, oh no, like, what do I do if it goes well? Like, then I have to have a second date, and then,
Oh
then
no.
the second date, right? Then the second date, but what if this leads to more things? And we didn't talk about do we want children or not having children? And, this cascade of
Worry.
thought, yeah, about worry, and can automatically be the trigger to pull out preemptively. Um, and I think that
But,
usually, I
but
think
rather than engage with the worry, right? Like rather
that's
than
right.
engage with it, yeah, like it's
Mhm.
real important stuff to know
Mhm.
what it is when it arises, to see as, oh, there's that thing again that comes from feeling anxious.
Mhm.
I'm anxious.
Mhm.
I'm putting myself out there. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's a part of me
And I
that hopes for good, and there's a part of me that's prepared for hurt. And this happens in my brain when that goes on, and so I can just let it happen and let's just go and see what's actually there.
yeah, and I think for me it was more like making it less uh less intenseful, meaning like I'm just getting to know them. Let's just start there instead of just going on this big
Yeah.
worry train about, oh well, what if, this and this and this. And the moment I kept it just being present and being there, um I'm in a relationship, right? Like you just
Then you're
it's
relating.
just, you're
Then you're relating.
relating.
Even if you don't like the person you're relating with, then you're
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
relating. Then you're not
yeah.
just with yourself in your head and happen to have
Hmm.
another person in front of you, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Then you're getting much closer to actually relating. I do think there's
Hmm.
another step as well that involves the uh, being able to interrogate the screen through which we relate to the other, um,
Hmm.
to the extent that, everyone's is jammed up with stuff from the past, and we
Oh
see the
yeah.
other person through that. I don't know that you'll ever get it completely clean, but being able to at least start to understand that. And also, you do the same thing with that. Oh, I expect that that's going to be there. So I'm going to try to take
Hmm.
that into account as well. To what
Hmm.
extent am I inferring that this person is now being critical to me, right? When they're just asking me a pretty basic question. To what extent am I inferring that because of this stuff on the screen about how my mother, my father, whoever used to always, ask me critical questions after I made a statement. And so I
Hmm.
expect that now. And
Yeah.
so I'm then more likely to see it in the other person and read it as critical as opposed to a curious, loving, caring question, or that they might just
Hmm.
be nervous as hell and asking me a question because they don't know what to say, right? Like all these other, so again, it opens up possibility. Yeah. So there's also that step. But yeah, this is I'm so glad. I'm so glad we had this conversation today. I think this is actually a perfect example of that connection thing. Like I
Yeah.
already feel less sick. And that's as a result of having connected with a human being.
Yeah.
And yeah, and there's a vitality to that.
Hmm.
Vitality, even though it can be difficult at times.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a really interesting question. How did you come to the negative pragmatism question?
Well, Julie Resch,
Oh, that's right. Mhm.
she's I really like her work. I was really caught by her idea of negative like psychoanalysis.
Okay.
Um, and I had my interview with her, and she just really struck me, ironically, as somebody that actually really cares. For someone that has such a negative psychoanalysis, she really is kind of have like a philosophy of like hospice care,
Mm,
almost.
yeah.
Like even if you couldn't change it, there is at least still this human connection. And then ironically, this human connection lacks, but then it's also precisely that this human connection lacks that we have human connection. It's
That's it. That's
it's
the risk.
that
Yes.
that's it, right? Like we're alienated, but we're alienated, and that allows us to precisely be together.
That's it.
Um,
That's it.
yeah.
You have
Hmm.
to know the alienation to know what it's like to get closer to being together, at least,
Yeah.
as well. Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. I hope this has been helpful to your thinking. I am aware um yeah, I've gone all over the map, but
No, it's been really helpful. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think every conversation I've ever had has been always very helpful. But yeah, I mean, even talking about, I don't think I would have been able to get to this level of relation today if I didn't,
no, cool.
talk about this.
Awesome. Good. I'm so pleased to hear that. Yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll keep in touch.